There's things you can control and there's things you can't. And all you can worry about is the things you can't control. That's the limit. You can't control other people. You can only control yourself. That means control your feelings, control your impressions of things, because that's the source of everything. Is Epictetus is how you see the world, your perspective. You can control then your choices and you can control your actions. And that is it. But I'm hoping that grown-ups in charge of education say, the humanities are important and the humanities are good. And let's give them the attention that they deserve in our schools.
Hey everyone, I'm Bianca Schulze, founder of the Children's Book Review, and this is the Growing Readers Podcast. Today, I am welcoming a truly remarkable voice in children's literature, someone who has written over 60 books for young readers and brings a rare combination of storytelling heart and philosophical depth to everything she creates. Claudia Mills is a recipient of the prestigious Curlin Award for her contribution to children's literature. She also spent more than 2 decades as a philosophy professor at the University of Colorado. In our conversation today, we talk about her famous hour-a-day writing practice timed with an hourglass, what it means to write for children, and how her 2 worlds, children's literature and philosophy, collide in her newest middle grade novel, Calliope Callisto Clark and the Search for Wisdom. We dig into the philosophy club at the heart of the story, why Epictetus just might be the most relevant thinker for an 11-year-old navigating a messy world, and why wisdom, as Claudia believes, truly belongs to everyone. Before we welcome Claudia Mills, here's the book synopsis for Calliope Callisto Clark and the Search for Wisdom. Difficult student Callie joins a philosophy club seeking the wisdom she needs to keep her beloved but equally difficult dog in this hilarious, heartfelt middle grade novel for underdogs and dog lovers alike. Once Callie, Calliope Callisto Clark, starts saying something, it's hard for her to stop. The opinion gets bigger and bigger, her voice gets louder and louder, and she gets in more and more trouble. She's in trouble with her teacher, who likes order and not Callie. She's in bigger trouble with her grampy, who blames Callie and her dog, aka best ever friend, Archie, for his ever-rising blood pressure. Then there's the biggest trouble of all. Just one more strike, and Callie could lose her beloved Archie forever. When she turns to Greek philosophy for answers on how to solve her problems, she only gets more questions. What is justice? What is fairness? And as her problems get bigger, so do her questions. Is it Callie's fault when Grampy has a stroke? Hi, Claudia. Welcome to the Growing Readers Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Bianca.
My gosh, I am so thrilled to have you because you're just one of my favorite human beings in this wonderful little kidlit world that we live in.
Which has a lot of wonderful human beings, I must say.
There are a lot in this industry. I think we're really, really lucky, especially when we take the time to stop and connect with one another.
And you're so good at doing that.
Aw, thank you. Well, I want to start with some fun, rapid-fire questions. So just to kind of get the conversation going, just whatever pops into your mind, you can reserve the right to have a different answer another day. So Socrates, Plato, or Epictetus, if you could have dinner with one, who's getting the invite?
Epictetus.
Hot take. Is it ever wise to break the rules?
Oh, see, that is much too complicated for a quick answer. As readers of the book will learn, and what Callie learns in the book is that there are no simple answers in the world of philosophy. So I would be very wary of anyone who is too absolute with a quickie answer.
Love that response. Okay, finish this sentence. True wisdom is?
I think true wisdom is learning how to live well.
Okay, and then last one. The one thing in your life you've learned you absolutely cannot control.
Oh, it's basically everything except myself, but in particular, other people.
Yeah.
And that is the most disappointing answer because they're what we want to control most, but absolutely cannot.
Yeah.
And I need to remind myself of this every single day.
Yeah, me too. Well, now we can go into some longer answers. And so this is my signature question that I love to ask every first time guest. To be a writer, they say you need to be a reader first. So was there a pivotal moment in which you considered yourself a reader?
Well, I read fairly young. My mother made little flashcards to help me learn the hard words of books. And she was an elementary school teacher herself, so she put a premium on literacy. But she insisted that I read all my library books out loud to her. So I think she wanted to make sure I wasn't just holding the book and acting like I could read, but I could really read. It felt like years went by, but I don't think it really was. But then when I was finally allowed to read that book alone, not aloud, but in the privacy of my own head, just me connecting with the book and the characters in it, I felt like I had entered, I guess I got my mother's stamp of approval to enter the world as an independent reader.
Well, so you've been a reader since childhood, and your mother had you read those library books aloud to her. So looking back, what do you think that practice of reading aloud books, reading aloud your library books gave you as a future writer?
Well, I think it gave me an ear for language. I pride myself on being a good, what I call reader alouder, that I'm a good reader alouder because I got a fluency in expression that I think helped train my ear for language and for dialogue in particular as a writer because I had to hear my own voice all the time reading. It made reading an oral as well as a visual activity for me that I think benefited me as a writer.
Yeah. Well, you've shared before that you write using your famous hour-a-day system, timed with an hourglass, and I love this. So can you walk us through how that system works and why you think it's been so effective for you over so many decades?
Well, there's about 500,000 reasons why the hour-a-day system timed with the hourglass is optimal, at least for me, and it might be for a lot of your listeners as well. First of all, a lot of us don't. The most common thing people say is, I would love to write a book, but I don't have time. And everyone gets the same 24 hours a day. And so the question is how we use them. And it's daunting to think of having to find that time. But if you only have to find an hour, and I actually have a backup half hour hourglass for when I only have a half hour. If you only can, so it encourages people to seize that 1 hour and encourages me to seize that 1 hour. And then if you only have 1 hour, you focus. That is your hour. That is the gift you have given yourself. That is the gift that the muses have given you. And so you use that hour. Now, that doesn't mean you use it all the time scribbling across the page, but you use it all the time thinking that this is your hour. And there's something about the hourglass that enhances the sacred nature of the hour. You turn the hourglass over, the sand is sifting through. You feel like you're entering this enchanted space using this ancient tool that you're connecting with writers throughout antiquity and this long tradition before you. I also really like the hourglass because I'm someone who, like if I say I'm going to start doing I'm an early morning person, but if I'm going to start writing at 5 a.m, and then it's 5:03. Well, that blew 5. I'll start writing at 6 a.m. Oh, but now it's 6:02. That ruined 6. But when you have the hourglass, your hour begins. Whether it's 5:17 or 5:19, your hour is sort of outside of ordinary clock time. It is just the time that is given to you by the hourglass. Now, some people think my system involves writing for a minimum of an hour a day, but it's also a maximum. I think there's something about stopping when the sand flows through to the bottom of the glass. And then you have 23 hours to let it settle, to let your ideas slip into your subconscious and be worked on there. They say that, after writers finish a draft of a book, they should step back and take some time off to get distance. Well, I give myself that gift every single day of stepping back and giving myself 23 hours of distance. And also, if I ever do break the rule, If I break the rule, and you asked if it's ever wise to break a rule, if I break the rule and I do 2 hours, the next day I don't even want to do the 1 hour. It takes too much out of me. This is just absolutely perfect. I declare.
I love that. I never really thought about the, making sure that you stop. I feel like I need to put your practice into my own day. And I love the idea behind the hourglass, because I am somebody who tends to like block out my calendar and that specific amount of time. And you're right. If I start at 5:07, then I'm already shortchanging myself part of my hour. I never really thought about the hourglass. And I was having a silly moment when you were describing that. My mom was a big fan of watching Days of Our Lives. And so I had the like sands through the hourglass.
My mother was too, and I watched it with her. Yes, sand through the hourglass. So are the days of our lives.
Yeah, you
got it. And if I have to get up during the hour for some reason, I tip the hourglass to its side, and then turn it back when I return. But I'm always afraid I'm tipping it the wrong way and I'm going to get confused. So I do my best to try to orient it so I will retrieve it correctly when I return to my task.
I love that. Okay, now we're all going to be out buying beautiful hourglasses.
Really, truly, after I give a presentation, hourglass sales are measurably increased around the world.
Yeah. I mean, I think we need to find some like beautiful crafty person on Etsy that makes the special Claudia Mills version.
Yes. She and I can go into business together.
Exactly. Well, Claudia, what is it that drives you and guides you to write specifically for kids? What makes you get up out of bed each morning and choose to write for kids?
Well, I think it's because of that childhood reading experience being so profound for me. The books I read as a child touched me in a way that no book has touched me since. I do love some books for grown-ups. I will acknowledge that. But those books I read as a child, I think because I was impressionable, but because the world was new to me, they had this staying power with me. And I still return to those books. I have a whole bookshelf full of my childhood favorites. And if I'm sad, if I've had a disappointing day, I go get one of those books and get into bed with it, and it makes the day right again. So I think it's the lasting power of those books I wanted to be part of. And I also think they say that, you have sort of a certain age person that you are inside. And I think I'm 10 years old inside. You look in the mirror and you think, this does look like a 10-year-old woman, but I'm 10-year-old inside, and I feel like I have a 10-year-old voice. Even when I write for adults, and I do write academic things for adults, I sometimes feel like it's still my 10-year-old voice telling the story.
Well, you've written over 60 books for young readers. That's phenomenal. And you're also a professor emerita of philosophy. So
I am.
How do those two worlds, children's literature and philosophy, finally collide in this beautiful new book that you've written?
Well, it was a long journey, though I felt that in a way from the start, I think I like to say that philosophers are the grown-ups who keep on asking the questions the other grown-ups have stopped asking. Those why questions and what's it all about and pressing for more deeper understanding, I think is very childlike, and I think it's also very philosophical. So there's a natural kinship there. But over the years, sometimes in my philosophy classes, I would bring in children's literature. When I taught Nietzsche, I would read to the students The Rainbow Fish, which was a book that Nietzsche would have hated, because Nietzsche was not about sharing and leveling and equality and sameness and let's take one of your bright shiny scales and give one to everybody. No, Nietzsche was about being on top of the mountain, solitary, unique. And so I would read my students The Rainbow Fish and say, all right, now let's talk about why Nietzsche would hate this book. And so I brought children's literature in whenever I could, and I did bring philosophy into my children's books, but obliquely, I would say. I never had my characters read a philosopher, but I had them asking, often, usually because I taught ethics, ethical questions. And I never wanted them to be questions with easy answers. I wanted them to be questions with hard answers. So in one of my books, I have a character who's an aspiring author, who oddly enough has certain similarities with me. And she has a dilemma that I have had, and I think almost every author has, who draws on her own life or his own life writing a book. If I write about my own life, I'm going to write about the people in my own life. And the people in my own life are real human beings. who have feelings, who may be hurt, who may feel exploited, who may be angry. How do you balance that need to respect their privacy with the need to tell your story, which is the only story in the end sometimes we can tell? And I gave that to my young character. She has a chance to publish something, and it's about her brother who's taunted her and made fun of her writing. And it's finally her chance to show him how successful she is. But what she's writing is something deeply personal about him. And she has to wrestle with that choice that every author, maybe not every author, but so many authors wrestle with. So I'm bringing these two together in their own little ways. But then I thought, I want to have one character sometime get to actually meet one of the, not meet. It's not like a time travel kind of book where she gets to go back to ancient Greece, but actually encounter the words. Because I loved the ideas of philosophy, but I also loved the words. I sometimes think I fell in love with the words first. Words like teleology and metaphysics. I just loved these words, and I wanted to know what those words meant and be able to drop them casually into conversation. And I wanted to let one of my characters meet the words of one of these philosophers. And so that's what inspired me to bring my two lives together so directly in this book.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to comment, just a flattery comment, so you can just, say thank you at the end. But I feel like you just did such a beautiful job of doing exactly what you just described, but in such a fun, relatable way for kids. And it doesn't feel preachy or teachy or any of that. It just flows so delightfully with just these little nuggets of wisdom. So just wanted to say well done on that.
I also wanted young readers to see you can read these great works of philosophy, except actually I knew that probably a sixth grader was not going to get very far. That's why I created in the book the Philosophy Club, where there could be an adult mediator to help present these ideas. So you read these great works of philosophy, but you can disagree with them. In fact, you're almost forced to disagree with them because they disagree with each other. There's not unanimity in the history of philosophy on any view. So you have the right to ask just the kind of question you asked at the beginning, like, is it ever acceptable to break a rule? And if you do you have to accept the punishment for that or not? Socrates' friends argued with him about this, and he argued back with them. And Epictetus, my very, very favorite. I have Callie and her fellow club members and her beloved librarian point out some aspects of Epictetus that they don't agree with.
Your main character has a very cool name, so let's talk about that. So she insists on being called by her full name, which is Calliope Callisto Clark. And I love that detail of you emphasizing how she wanted to be called by her full name. So tell us about the significance and particular reason you gave her such a grand lyrical name.
Well, I think in literature or in the Bible, everywhere, names are significant. And the moment where you change your name is a significant moment. So in the Bible, Saul, who has persecuted Christians, becomes Paul when he becomes a Christian. Or Abram, after he makes his covenant with God, becomes Abraham. And so this moment, it's like an ancient way of signifying a deep and important change in identity, to change your name. And we see it when immigrants have come to America and been forced to change their name, an unwilling change of name, or when women traditionally have taken their husband's name, this deep change of identity that comes with that. And we all go through that. Maybe you didn't, but I didn't either, really. But my friends whose names were like Judy or Susie, they had to start spelling it with an I, or trying out other variants on their name just to make the name their own. So anyway, I knew names mattered. I guess, dislike the grandiosity of Callie because she is someone who wants to be extraordinary, using her name as a way to do it. And she has her best friend, Peggy, who is not at all like Callie, who's much more matter of fact and down to earth. And Peggy's not a name you hear much nowadays, but in grad school, I had a friend named Peggy Nicholson. And this other grad student and I decided her name was too plain because it wasn't short for Margaret. It was just Peggy. And so we decided her name should be not Peggy Nicholson, but Pegasus Nicolopoulos. And anyway, so I have Callie trying to rename Peggy too, and Peggy balking at it. But I just liked that way of showing her character right from the beginning, and also showing that she was going to go through a major change in her life in the course of this book.
Yeah. Well, Callie is a big personality. She erupts with opinions. She loves her dog fiercely, and she's genuinely trying to become a better version of herself throughout the story. So what drew you to writing a character like her?
Well, in a way, I've written so many different kinds of characters, but they all are aspects of myself. I was a very, very intense child. Very, very intense. And probably was this way until about 20 years ago when I finally calmed down a little bit. So I identified that with her. But I also knew that since I wanted to introduce philosophy, I wanted a character who would really need the philosophy, who would really have a genuine hunger for this kind of wisdom. And for her, it's mainly, in some sense, instrumental. Her grandparents are going to take her dog away if she doesn't shape up and get her dog to shape up. And so she thinks I need all the wisdom I can get to help me do this. So I wanted to give her a strong motivation. But I also, because the ideas themselves are intense and challenging for an 11-year-old, I wanted her to be someone who was ready for that because of her own intellect, not just emotional intensity. Her emotional intensity is why she kind of needs the toning down that comes from Stoicism. But her intellectual intensity is what makes her able to welcome these ideas that could be a little overwhelming maybe for many people.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the philosophy club just a moment ago, so let's kind of dig into that a little bit. So the philosophy club at the heart of this story explores the works of Socrates, Plato, Epictetus. And Epictetus in particular seems to be Callie's guiding light. So tell listeners a little bit about who Epictetus was and why his ideas feel so relevant for an 11-year-old living today.
Okay. All right. Well, I think, he's my favorite philosopher. So I don't know if he's my favorite. On different days of the week, I might have different favorites. But this message that there's only what you can control that you need to worry about, that there's two kinds of things. There's things you can control and there's things you can't. Everything can be sorted into those two categories. Things I can control, things that are up to me, and things that I cannot control and that are not up to me. And it's such a liberating moment when you realize how little of the world you can really do anything about. And of course, this is a question that's raised at the very end of the book. Well, does this encourage a kind of passivity? Throwing up your hands into surrendering, but you can do a lot worse than surrender off into what can't be changed. So I just thought his wisdom was so what we all most need. I also did have fun, though, trying to think of bits of philosophy that would be accessible to young readers and get them to want to start talking.
Yeah. And did it just make your little your philosophy professor heart so happy to be able to come up with a story that had philosophy club in it?
It did. No, it really did. It feels like also nowadays the humanities are under attack. They are losing funding. Philosophy departments, humanities departments in universities are being cut. And STEM, I'm not going to knock the importance of STEM, science and technology and engineering and math. These things are important. And I'm not going to, and sometimes they'll throw the arts in and make it be STEAM. But what about the humanities, like STEAM, or something where we need that H in there? But the humanities are considered expendable. And I think they're essential. And so it was part of my sort of hidden agenda, I think, to make young readers and adult readers think, wow, this is something that's worth learning. And I wish I had learned this sooner. And I'm glad that I got to learn it by reading this book by Claudia Mills.
Yes.
30 years ago, Blinds.com broke the mold and made custom window treatments easy for everyone. Over 25 million windows later, we're celebrating by giving our customers up to 50% off site-wide during our anniversary sale. Whether you DIY it or want a pro to handle everything from measure to install, Blinds.com has you covered. Shop online, access real design professionals, and get free samples. Thank you for 30 amazing years. Shop the anniversary sale now through March 11th and get up to 50% off site-wide at Blinds.com.
I mean, I always think about just reading itself as a fundamental skill behind all other kinds of learning. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what you think about, I'm going off the cuff with this question right now, but so hopefully it makes sense. But what do you think about philosophy as an underlying fundamental skill behind all of the, like you just mentioned STEAM, for example, because maybe if you have a more philosophical mindset, maybe that allows you to be more open to experimenting within the sciences. And maybe you come up with a discovery because you're able to think more philosophically. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that that's absolutely right. And it's sort of strange that philosophy is, for the most part, not taught in K-12 education. And there's a movement, Philosophy for Children, P4C, that is trying to correct this, but they don't do it generally by bringing in the great philosophers. They do it by getting children just to talk philosophically among themselves, like posing a question like, is it ever right to break a rule? And let the children themselves come up with all the arguments and counter arguments. I have this weakness, for the text and for the great books and for the words. So there's a movement to try to do that, because philosophers, one of the bragging points in the university is that we are the best there is at teaching critical thinking. Critical thinking is logic. Who invented logic? Aristotle. Aristotle, was one of the first to codify logical precepts and, principles. So we own critical thinking. And so I do think that it's a skill that's going to be helpful in whatever field you enter, to be able to think critically. But I have to say, I gave our department's little commencement address when I retired. And I said, yes, we're the best at critical thinking. But I think I also wanted to teach appreciative thinking, that there's just these wonderful ideas, that there's this wealth of beautiful things made by novelists and historians who are trying to understand the world, and by philosophers, and just to marvel at the richness of what the human mind can generate and stimulate your own brain to generate.
Yeah. Well, I'm all here I like your acronym, the STEMF. It's like putting the oomph into STEAM.
That just popped into my head on the spot during this interview.
Just because you're a genius. Well, there's a quote in the book. I think wisdom belongs to everybody. And that feels like the heart of the story. So talk to me about that quote and how it fits with Callie's tale.
I will. I want to say one thing first. I noticed at the university, some departments were eager to weed out majors. Chemistry would make organic chemistry so hard that they hoped a lot of people were going to fail, because they were weeding them out, and partly doing this pre-screening for medical school to get rid of people. In philosophy, we never felt that way. We thought everyone should major in philosophy, or at least get exposed to philosophy. And we rejoiced anytime anyone came into the fold, because we really thought that philosophy belonged to everybody and that everybody needed it. And I think the way it fits into the story is through the process of this philosophy club, people who thought it's a very small club. It basically started just with Callie and the school librarian. That's all. And then her friend Peggy doesn't even want to do it. She goes, you really want me to read like boring books by boring old dead people and just die of boringness? And Callie says, yes, I do, but it isn't going to be boring. So, but Peggy is sort of won over by these ideas, although she wasn't initially interested. And Callie's nemesis, Philip Kumar, who she thinks he's so smart and smarter than she is, and he's a know-it-all and teacher's pet. He's naturally drawn to these ideas, but she's not naturally drawn to having Philip in the club. But then she finds that through their interactions there, it's a new way for them to make a connection. And then, spoiler alert, there's a surprise addition to the club at the end, like the person that Callie would have thought was least likely to join in the search for wisdom. So I think maybe there's a partnership here. My favorite review of the book was from Kirkus, who said that the book is a love letter to seekers. And I think that that's what it is and what I wanted it to be. But I think there's a camaraderie among seekers, that we're all seekers together. And seekers don't always find, and seekers can be mistaken about what they find. But the community of seekers is a very powerful form of community. And I think the more we all thought of ourselves as seekers rather than already being certain about every single thing that we believe, the better the world would be.
Yes, I love that. Seekers. And in my mind, I had always thought about it. I'm always feeling curious. And I guess having a curiosity makes you a seeker.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes, and maybe like this is what Peggy was feeling, all these old dead guys with boring information, but ancient philosophy, just from the outside, can feel intimidating even for adults. So let alone the middle schoolers. So talk to me about how you wove those big ideas into the story so naturally that it never feels like a lesson.
Okay. Well, I tried to pick, Epictetus, I told you why I picked him. I thought, well, what other things are like simple, sort of detachable bits of philosophy so I don't have to engage in someone's whole huge system? So I was very intrigued by the story that Plato puts forward in the Republic of the ring of Gyges, this ring that the shepherd finds and he puts it on his finger and he becomes invisible. And whoa, now that he's invisible, he can sleep with the queen and murder the king and take over the kingdom. And the idea of, what would you do if you were invisible? And I thought, well, that's something the kids would really get engaged in talking about. And then Socrates' realization that he's the wisest of all men simply because he alone knows he knows nothing. That's pretty good to ponder. And then his being sentenced to death by the people of Athens for being like stirring up curiosity and questioning among the youth of the city, being condemned to drink hemlock, and he's willing to go ahead and do it because he thinks it's important to obey the law, as his friends are saying, are you out of your mind? Escape, come with us. We can save you from this. So I thought that would be these would be just fun things for kids to talk about. And then it just seemed as if almost organically it wove itself into Callie's life because Callie is so kind of full of herself and her troubles that she relates everything back to her. I almost didn't have to relate it back to her. She relates it right back to her. She's let her dog off leash and she thinks the police are out to arrest her, which is not true. But then she gets to ponder this should she accept the punishment for having an off-leash dog? And would she accept the punishment if she disobeyed rules? Well, no, she's planning to run as fast as she can away from it. And so she would bring it back to herself, I think, in a natural kind of way. And Peggy doesn't so much, but Philip, in a couple of the scenes, brings it back to himself, too. Peggy's more just quiet and doodling and then saying some really smart thing because there's a lot more to Peggy than meets the eye.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit kind of more about what Kelly has going on. And some of it is alluded more in like backstory, but she's navigating some genuinely heavy circumstances. She's an orphan and she's at risk of losing her dog. And then her grampy has a stroke. So you also had to balance that emotional weight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you balanced it by using this, what I think is really a charming level of humor that runs throughout the book. So was it an intentional effort to find that kind of balance between the emotional weight and the lightheartedness, or is that just something that comes naturally for you when you're writing?
Well, this particular book, I don't usually write in first person. I like to write in third person. But this book, I started writing just letting her talk to me and pour out about her name and her family and her situation. And then I liked her voice so much, it allowed me to continue. But I think, some of the children's books of the past, I think, subconsciously influenced me, like Anne of Green Gables. She has a terribly oppressed life, orphan and really cruel foster families that she's lived with, but she's just still always looking for the joy in every situation and finding scope for imagination in her circumstances. So maybe subconsciously Anne was a little bit of a role model for Callie. And Anne also has those very intense highs and lows and, soaring with rapture and then in the depths of despair.
You have such a rich backlist, including The Lost Language and The Last Apple Tree and your After School Superstars chapter book series, and I could keep going. So for listeners who are just now discovering you through Callie, where would you want to send them next? So if Callie's story is the first one that they're experiencing, what should they read next?
Well, I write mainly middle grade and then third grade level chapter books. So in a way, the age of the person who loves Callie might not be drawn to the third grade level stories. So it's more that the third grade level reader might grow into Callie's story. But I think The Lost Language and The Last Apple Tree, the two other middle grades I've done recently, both have some big questions that might be appealing to those who are drawn to big questions of the kind Callie is considering. So the last apple tree looks at family secrets and how the hiddenness of them, their very secrecy of them, can be toxic within families, and how exposure of them can feel scary and can feel painful, but can be liberatory. And so, I think there's some big questions there. On the lost language, I bring in the whole issue of endangered languages and expose readers to that as, a real tragedy in the world that all these languages are going extinct. But also you can ask, well, why is it a tragedy? Things change all the time. Look at the English language, how it has changed enormously since the time of Chaucer. Do we think that's a terrible thing, that it's basically a whole different language now? So to think about languages, and then also to think about how we use language in our own lives. What do we say and not say? Because Betsy, my main character in that book, is someone who is the quiet one, and her friend Lizard is the force to be reckoned with, and she's the Callie. She has a best friend who's a Callie, and she's more the introspective, introverted one, but gets to come into her own. So I think there's a lot of rich material for thought in those other books.
We're getting towards the end of our conversation, and so I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have a copy of Calliope Callisto Clark and the Search for Wisdom near you?
It just so happens
Good.
that I do.
Do you have like a highlight or a little piece that you would be willing to read out loud? And you could take a minute to find a spot that you want to read.
Okay. I think I like the scene in the beginning when this is what sets up the need of Callie for philosophy, is this thing that has gone very wrong with her grandparents. She's had this altercation with her teacher at school. The teacher is called home. She gets home and there's no one in the house, and she is starting to worry. And then she hears the garage door opening. So she goes out to the garage. Grampy was helping Granny out of the car, and he is not a chivalrous ladies first sort of gentleman. And Granny had her arm held stiffly in front of her, all wrapped up in what looked like big bulky bandages and carried in a sling. Granny, what happened? No, Archie, I've told you over and over again. No jumping. Archie, stop it. Archie, get down. Grampy let loose a string of very bad words. Unless my eyes were deceiving me, he gave Archie a kick, and my grandfather is not a violent man. Nobody answered my what happened question until we were all in the house and Grampy had settled Granny in her chair, and I had put Archie in the downstairs bathroom, which was our equivalent of dog jail, or maybe, the way things were going, maximum security dog prison, because I was getting a bad feeling that whatever had happened to Granny's arm might have something to do with Archie. What happened, Grampy said then, emphasizing his words. What happened, he repeated, was that your grandmother was getting ready to take your dog on a short walk so that your dog would burn off some energy and stop trying to dig a hole to China in the middle of her favorite braided rug. When the phone rang and the answering machine picked up, and we could hear it was a long message from your teacher. So Granny hurried to the phone, leash still in hand, but your teacher hung up before she reached it, and your dog got himself tangled up in the leash, as his mission is always to be maximally in the way, and she tripped and fell and broke her wrist, which may or may not need surgery, and will likely take 4 to 6 weeks to heal. I thought Granny might say, "Oh, Henry, let's not make this sound worse than it is. You've made it sound like this was Callie's and Archie's fault. But accident just happened." She didn't. "Callie," Grampy said, "when we let you adopt Archie from the Humane Society back at the start of August, it was an experiment. It was Granny's idea, not mine, but I was willing to give it a try. Maybe a pet would be good for Callie, your grandmother said. Maybe now that she has the challenge of starting middle school, it would have a calming effect on her. Maybe it would even out her moods." My bad feeling was getting worse, like 10,000 times worse. "It has helped," I said, though this was the first time I had heard anything about an experiment involving me, as a guinea pig or lab rat or some other creature at the mercy of cold-hearted scientists. "It has been good for me. It's been wonderful for me. I am calmer." I tried to keep my voice calm right now. "My moods are all happiness when I'm with Archie. I don't get super upset about things anymore. I haven't gotten super upset about anything since..." this morning, Grampy said, since according to your teacher's voicemail message, you apparently threw a fit or had a tantrum or meltdown or whatever one calls these things. Callie, he said again, and the sorrowfulness in his voice was downright terrifying now. The experiment didn't work. It hasn't helped you and it hurt your grandmother. It takes a long time for old bones to heal. Don't let him say it, don't let him say it, don't let him say it. I turned pleading eyes to Granny, but her eyes were as full of tears as mine were starting to be. Honey, she said, Grampy is right this time. We're going to have to let the Humane Society find a new home for Archie. A good home, a loving home. No, I wailed. If you do that, you will break Archie's heart. You will break my heart. And broken hearts like broken bones never heal. A moment later, I had locked myself into the dog prison bathroom with Archie, holding him tight as he licked my tears with his long, loving tongue. Now Grampy and Granny would see what a real meltdown looked like, one that would last till the end of their lives and the end of mine.
That was so wonderful. I'm ready for you just to keep reading, okay? So, Claudia, I have to ask you, what's the one thing that you hope listeners carry with them from our conversation today? Just one tiny nugget of wisdom that helps them take one tiny step forward in their lives.
Well, it will have to be that there's things you can control and there's things you can't. And all you can worry about is the things you can't control. That's the limit. You can't control other people. You can only control yourself. That means control your feelings, control your impressions of things, because that's the source of everything. Is Epictetus is how you see the world, your perspective. You can control then your choices and you can control your actions. And that is it. But I'm hoping that grown-ups in charge of education say, the humanities are important and the humanities are good. And let's give them the attention that they deserve in our schools.
Yes, absolutely. And if we have teachers and educators listening, Claudia put together an amazing discussion guide that I think is so great for having. I mean, you could have your own little mini philosophy club just based on the little discussion guide to be paired with Callie's story. So I know that's available. But Claudia, on behalf of every Growing Readers listener today and every kid who has ever felt too big for the room or too loud or too full of opinions, I relate. Just thank you. Thank you for writing Calliope Callisto Clark and The Search for Wisdom, for bringing Epictetus to middle grade, and for reminding all of us that wisdom really does belong to everyone. And thank you for the 60 plus books, for your hour-a-day dedication, and for continuing to show up for young readers. We're so lucky to have you in this community, and it's been such a joy to have you on the show today. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all you do to bring books to readers and bring readers to books and foster just this kind of community of seekers that we talked about today.
Thank you so much for joining us on this quest for growing readers. Claudia Mills is truly one of a kind, and I hope our conversation left you feeling just a little more like the seeker you already are, and maybe inspired to flip an hourglass and get to work on whatever creative endeavor you're on. If Callie's story sparks something in you, I have a feeling you already know what to do next. Get your hands on a copy of Calliope Callisto Clark and The Search for Wisdom. Links to order are waiting for you in the show notes. And if you want to explore more of Claudia's incredible world, including her 60-plus books for young readers, author resources, and that wonderful discussion guide perfect for starting your very own philosophy club, head over to her website, claudiamillsauthor.com. You'll find everything linked in the show notes. Until next time, keep reading, keep seeking, and keep growing. The Growing Readers podcast is a production of the Children's Book Review. For more amazing books like Calliope Callisto Clark and The Search for Wisdom, I hope you'll visit us at thechildrensbookreview.com.